Hello, everybody. Today I'm with David Kogelman. Hi, David. How you doing?
Hi, Neil. Good to see you as always.
You too, buddy. So I know it's like you have a very particular take on life.
Yeah.
You have like some favorite songs. Um, Tell me a little bit about this.
Specifically, what? My take on life?
Either take
My
life or
songs?
a song. I think you said your favorite song was "What a Wonderful World."
Yes, yes. It kind of, it it highlights the beauty of life and just the great enjoyment to be found in just being in the present, being recognizing that everybody has something to offer, that everybody has value, everybody's entitled to be treated with dignity and respect. Most people don't really understand that. I was very tickled when I heard Obama say something to that effect not that long ago, you know. But that's the way I've lived my life, is everybody's entitled to be treated with dignity and respect. As a lawyer and a judge, I do my best to be fair and understanding, and adhere to the requirements of my profession, but always looking to what makes people do the things they do, be the way they are, and accepting that. Just to give you a really quick example, there was I had a case once as I was I was a litigator, I was an appeals attorney, I was an arbitrator, no fault insurance, and my last 8 years before I retired a year ago was spent as an unemployment insurance judge. And I got to see people from every walk of life, every cultural background. And I'll never forget, I had this one guy, I don't know, he was a janitor or whatever in a hospital, and he got fired and they didn't want him to get benefits because he almost came to blows with somebody. And he gets in front of me and he's talking about it, and he said, and he kept going like this, and wagging his finger. And I said, it's like, what's a big deal about it? Is there something in your cultural background that has some significance to? And he says, yeah, those are fighting words. People get killed over doing that where I come from. And it's that kind of openness to looking at where people are coming from that I find so lacking, especially today.
I hear you, man. That's so true. You have recently, about a year or so, had a pretty big adventure in terms of moving.
Yeah.
How'd you determine to move to New Orleans?
Oh, well, let's see.
Quite the adventure as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, as far as everybody's concerned, and believe me, everybody in my family told me I shouldn't do it. What if the worst happens? So, the worst has happened in many ways. We got hit by a pandemic. A hurricane came over me. I walked out in the late evening to look up to clear skies with angry clouds all around, because I was in the middle of the eye of the hurricane. But what happened was I was having some problems with health problems, and in particular some chest pressure and stuff like that. Came to find out that I had coronary artery disease. I had to have some stents put in my coronary arteries, but I noticed it was worse than the cold. And I used to love the cold. I mean, I lived my entire life in the Northeast, and so finally I said, well, I gotta move somewhere warmer, because it's not such a strain on my heart, on my body, and all. And so I started looking around. I went to visit a very dear friend of mine I've known for over 20 years, ex-girlfriend, lover, and whatnot, down in Sarasota, Florida. She lived in a seniors community of 3,000 units, and with a golf course and a river running through it and everything else. And I almost wanted to throw up. It was so boring. It was so manicured. And I like the wild. I mean, I've camped in most of the parks in the United States and a lot of places around the world. And then I went to visit my friends in Santa Fe and Albuquerque. including one that we'll talk about later, a very dear friend of mine, Wanda, who passed this year. Uh, and I loved it there. It's beautiful. I got friends there and everything else, but they got the worst healthcare in the country. So I said, okay, I've been to New Orleans for many years, thanks to a friend who got a timeshare here years ago for jazz festival weekends. And I've always loved music. Like yourself, I was at Woodstock, and my love of music has never stopped. So I decided to come here the worst possible time, the middle of August. And it was the worst possible time. Temperature was over 100 degrees, felt like it was about 110. But I walked around a little bit and I said, okay, I can tolerate this. I'm okay. Besides, there's no damn fool New Orleanians walking around in that kind of temperature. Most of them are indoors in the air conditioning, And so I started looking for a house. And every month I would come down here. I found to do this thing, I took an Airbnb room to check it all out. And the guy that was renting it, I discovered was a real estate agent. So he became my real estate agent, and we started looking at places. I'd look online. He'd even do walkthroughs for me from remotely, And finally, I found this place, and I was here before COVID. I bought my house in January before COVID arrived here, to our knowledge.
Perfect timing.
Perfect timing. Of course, then I had.
But you know what? One of the things I know about this is, you've worked really hard to renovate the place, and and you have the different color schemes in different rooms, and we can see in the background some blue and the green here, and it's really working for you. And part of that is because of your creativity, and I know that that's been something that's been an important piece, especially lately. What's that all about?
Well, first of all, let me start by telling you my first job ever was before the days of Hallmark, was going door to door selling greeting cards. And the first thing I did with money I got from that was to buy a camera. And I have basically never been without a camera ever since. I love taking pictures, especially candid pictures and nature and whatnot. So, but my creativity's always been kind of stifled. The best example of where that comes from is a story about the eve of my wedding. George R.R. Martin, who I'm sure most people listening will recognize the name from Game of Thrones. He and his now wife were sitting in my living room, and my father was there. And my father, in his typical non-judgmental fashion, says, "What do you do for a living?" George says, "I'm a writer." My father says, "Yeah, but what do you do for a living?" George says, "I'm a writer." My father says, "Can't earn much of a living that way." As it happened, that particular day, he had signed a contract for more than had ever been paid before for a fantasy novel, $100,000, which was also more than my father had ever earned 3 years in his life. So, but it was that kind of judgment stuff that kept me from ever pursuing my creativity, my art, and it's like, okay, so I went to Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, thinking I was going to be a nuclear physicist, and soon discovered I had no aptitude for physics whatsoever. But I was good at math, and I discovered, of all things, that I loved history. And the one teacher there are only two teachers I remember from Gordon. One was Mrs. Braslow, who always dressed in those crazy colors and was as obnoxious as hell, as I recall it. And the other was Mrs. Schwartz, who was, the math teacher, who was really great, And so, but I had a teacher in college who taught the course that everybody hates, world history, the survey course, right? But I think he was a Unitarian minister or something. He loved it. He made it come alive. It made it come alive for me. So instead of being a nuclear physics major, I ended up a math and history major. I soon discovered that while I was good at math, I really did not like it very much. Just because you're good at something, and that's one of the lessons I taught my son. Just because you're good at something doesn't mean you have to do it. And so I became a history major, and it was a self-directed course. So it was like, basically I studied revolutionary history. I studied the Russian Revolution, the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, liberalism in America, the anarchism, you name it, I studied it. And then I graduated in 1971. with a degree in math and history, and what do you do with that? You know, well, you know, if you don't, especially if you don't want to be a teacher, and I had no interest in being a teacher at the time. Now I've since discovered that I really did enjoy teaching when I've had the opportunity, but you know, what do you do with that? I went back to New York. I drove taxi cab for a year. I saved up enough money to go to law school, and I went to law school. Why
Did you
did I
have
go to
any
law school?
particular incident when you were a taxi driver?
Oh God.
Just tell us one. Just tell us one.
One incident as a taxi driver. God, I'm trying to, now you got me. That's a tough one. Most of them are not be countable.
Did somebody try to rob you?
Oh yeah. So here I am, good middle class Jewish boy from Yonkers, who doesn't really know the city at all. Between my junior and senior year in college, I become a taxi driver, and you know, to make money. And I'm driving for all of a month, and you know, I don't know my way around, but I like night shift. I always like the night, so I work the 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. shift. 3 o'clock in the morning, I pick somebody up from the Center Island of Broadway. And this is summer of 1970. Center Island of Broadway. He gets in my cab. He directs me up to Harlem, pulls a gun on me, tells me to get out of the cab. I think he's going to shoot me in the back, but he just takes the cab and drives off. Crashes into a tree not far away, but that's a whole nother story.
And what did you learn about yourself from that?
Well, from that, nothing in particular. But it was just before 4th of July weekend. I went away for 4th of July weekend. I come back, I'm driving, I pick somebody up on Central Park South, you know, the plaza, that whole strip there. It's light out. It's nice weather. Guy gets in my cab, directs me onto the Park Drive, pulls a gun on me. Okay. Now, the net effect of that was it put a scare in me. I really stopped. I got very selective about who I picked up, you know, minorities, you know, generally. And I went back to college for my senior year, and I came back on semester break. And for some reason, I stopped being afraid. And that was one of the most transformational experiences of my life. Because when I stopped being afraid, I began, I don't know, in some way I became different. I picked up anybody, anywhere. I never had a problem. And I drove for the entire year after I graduated college. And I'll never forget this. You know, this was a time when there were 3 or 4 killings a month and about 1,000 robberies of cab drivers. I picked up 4 big guys in the East Bronx, you know, and they're gone to Harlem, right? And they're huge. One of the best is in the front seat with me. I mean, you know, I'm all of 5'3", they're like 6 foot and up. And the guy gets in the front seat with me, and he, you know, he looks over at me and says, "Are you a brother?" And you know, that was a big thing at the time. And I kind of tilted my head a little bit, something I learned to do with taller people. Tilt my head a little bit, you know, and look up a little queryingly. So I'm not really looking up, you know. And I said, "Well, if you're talking about skin color, obviously I'm not. But we're all brothers and entitled to be treated with dignity and respect." And I had a beautiful conversation with him all the way to Harlem. He got out of the cab. He gave me the 3-point handshake, a good tip, and he called me brother. And that's in many ways the story of my life ever since.
I want you to know, Dave, I want you to know that's exactly who you are now. You haven't, you know, that has helped you, I think, grow in such a way that has made it so you're the person who you are, willing to take risks, going off to New Orleans, traveling all over the world, being with all these wonderful people. I'm so happy that we had this opportunity to start peeling a little bit of that onion away to let people know who you are and what it is that has been going on. I hope you'll be at the reunion in 2022, and everybody will get a chance to really have more conversations with you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for doing this. It's been a pleasure.